7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, and welcome to the Marketing Essentials podcast. Our unique team helps small businesses grow by providing essential marketing expertise.
Hello and welcome to the Marketing Essentials podcast. I am Bill of W. Parmentier Photography.
I'm Justin of Justin Kerr Design.
I'm Alicia with the Spark Social.
And together we make up
The
Marketing Essentials
Essentials
team. So part 2 of the marketing your business through podcasting, or the misunderstandings of marketing your business through podcasts, whichever way you want to look at it.
Right. So in part 1, we talked about the benefits of marketing your business with a podcast and also some of the challenges. And today we're going to cover myths and misunderstandings, as well as some tips.
I'm sorry, the way you said it, it sounded like you said miss and misunderstandings.
Yeah, it's sense and
been
sensibility.
a long day.
Instead of
Myths.
myths.
Myths and misunderstandings, as well as some tips about how to do.
Before we get to that, can we take like
What?
30 seconds and just do a quick summary of what we talked about in the last podcast, just so we can get it?
The last podcast was benefits and challenges. So
Correct.
benefits,
Yep.
in a nutshell, what would you say?
All the benefits are you can increase your reach. You can become more of a credible expert in your field.
Build your credibility.
Helps with your networking.
You can repurpose the podcast content on many different channels.
Okay. And the cons is
It takes a lot of time.
takes practice.
It's work.
Takes work.
Right.
Building a listenership.
Yes. So and it also takes technical know-how if you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's more than just a mic and a recording.
Laptop, yeah. So that's the basics behind it. If you really want to hear more, go back and listen to last week's podcast. But
Very good podcast.
in this case, we're going to go on to the next part, which is the myth part.
The myths and misunderstandings.
So-
I'm really having trouble with that word.
you know what the problem is with these mics? It's in your ear, it still sounds like you're saying miss.
Yeah.
Me too. But anyway, sorry, I digress.
I think first misunderstanding about marketing your business through podcasting is that anyone can do it well.
It's funny because anytime I hear that, I think back to when we did our webinar. And I said, we can do this. Why not? And Alicia's like, yes, let's do it. And Justin's like, whoa.
No, I'm glad we did it, but
Yeah, it
we
was a
quickly
great
learned
webinar,
that
but, yeah.
it was hard to do well.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So with podcasting, same thing holds. If you're going to do it well, you're going to need to practice. You're going to need to understand the first dozen times you do it.
It's going to sound
It's not going to
rough.
be great,
Yeah.
but you will get better, right? So it's a learning curve, just like anything.
Yeah, and always be learning too.
Always be learning, yeah.
And your sound's going to get better if you take the time to learn some of the tools, the tech stuff behind it. Because I saw someone, I'm not going to name any names, but somebody in my social network that was doing a quote unquote podcast. And it was one mic from multiple people sitting around a table. Goodness gracious, I don't know, whatever.
She was censoring herself on that one. Can you tell?
I'll say us, but not God. No. So, it was just horrible sounding, and you have to keep that in mind that if the sound is not good, no matter how good your message or your content is, nobody is staying on that podcast. They will not turn the volume up. They will not struggle to hear you if the quality is poo.
Yeah, we actually had one podcast early on.
Crap.
I'm going to that too. We had a podcast early on that when we went back and re-recorded because I did not like the sound of it.
Bill's a perfectionist, but I agree with you on that.
Yeah. No, I remember that particular episode.
I was just
Thankfully,
heartbroken that happened that way. But
Yeah. And that was with a guest.
yes.
Oh,
Thankfully,
I recall.
Thankfully, it was a good
Bob.
friend of ours, Bob Salvis, who
Long-time
was
guest.
gracious enough to come back and re-record. And quite frankly, I think it was better than the first time around.
Yeah,
It
so
was.
I think that example was way more than you in perfectionism because you're very good at the editing and you have a high standard, which is good. Perfectionism is not bad, but I think with that one it was just unsalvageable.
Sure, yeah.
So, Bob,
And sometimes those things happen. That's another thing that we didn't really mention in the last podcast, but you need to be able to give yourself a little bit of grace because things are going to happen.
Right.
Problems are going to come up,
Right.
and sometimes a podcast is going to go south.
So another myth about podcasting is that build it and they will come.
talked about a little bit about this in the last one.
That's true.
But still, it's a great point to harp on because we think that I'm going to launch this podcast and I'm going to get a ton of listeners.
Not true.
no,
You need to market.
Well, yeah, and you also need it takes time to figure out where to market. If you're not going to go to an expert that's going to help you to market your podcast, it's going to take time. And even when you do have an expert, it takes time, but it'll take even that much more
Right.
because you need to figure out where that niche is going to fit.
Right. Well, think of it as, just offering another service. You're doing a podcast. It's a service to your target demographic.
Yep.
And just like any service, if you don't market it, nobody knows you have it.
Right. It's like having a website and not advertising it and putting no SEO behind it, not plugging it on social, not ever talking about it, and just expecting people to come to your website.
Yeah, there's very few that people that just start a website and podcast, and immediately get thousands of followers. And usually those are people that are famous for something.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Right.
They have
Right.
that credibility. And I think that's what's leading to the misconception
That didn't
of
make
just
it.
starting a podcast and boom, I'm instantly getting all these listeners because there's a lot of famous people or people who, not famous, but maybe industry experts that have that following and then bring it to the podcast. Whereas people like us, I mean, guys, I hate to break it to you, but we're not that famous.
I'm famous in my own mind. I believe that.
Yeah.
But the other thing to keep in mind also is podcasting. That field is getting very busy at this point.
Well, that gets into my
Which gets to the next
last
part.
myth, which is
Stand out.
related to the second one, and that is, I'll be unique.
Yes, you're a unique little snowflake, Justin.
Right. Now, it's true that everyone has their own take on a
Sure.
particular topic, but there's so much competition out there in podcasts. I mean, my goodness, just go to iTunes and look at the offerings, and there's thousands and thousands of podcasts.
You can have a podcast on like being recently divorced to being a helicopter mom to being
A dog lover or-
literally
Yeah, yeah.
anything.
Right. And there's going to be podcasts out there already in your same space.
Oh yeah.
So if you do want to stand out, it's going to take some effort.
Now,
right?
that you bring up an excellent point on that is also researching the area that you're going to be doing a podcast on. See what some of the other people out there are doing.
Right. When that'll help you figure out your own unique angle on it.
Exactly.
There's tons of marketing podcasts out there.
yeah.
We didn't invent this. I do think that we are.
Bill made a face.
One of the things I think that makes us unique is that there's three of us, and we do have good chemistry. And the conversational aspect of this, I think, is much more engaging than just someone alone monologuing.
Sure.
And we have different backgrounds too, so that brings a different marketing perspective.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think some of the other marketing podcasts maybe are more niche at times.
Yeah.
And we're very much about being local. It's not that our content doesn't have an appeal beyond Rhode Island, but we very much all enjoy being part of this Rhode Island community. Matter of fact, our private Facebook group is called Little Rhody Marketing Support Group.
Yes.
So I think that also makes us unique, and there's 800,000 people to reach in Rhode Island, not to mention the people in Southeast Massachusetts. So, our market is big enough, but, having that local sort of mindset, I think, makes us a little bit
Well, I mean,
unique.
that's it. You should really be looking for that one little part that makes you unique that stands out from all the other crowded fields,
Right.
So this is something we didn't talk about in the last podcast, part of the series, podcast part 1, but some people do podcasting from the hobby side. So maybe they talk about knitting because they love knitting or whatever it is. It's more hobby.
Not a knitting fan, huh?
I don't know. Whatever. I've been... Justin's wife knits, and she's very good.
This is a weird thought that came to my mind, but I wonder if those cable access channels were the precursor to those type of podcasts.
Well,
Bob Ross.
you know what I'm talking about?
Did Bob Ross have
No,
a podcast?
but there used to be in local Rhode Island access.
Painter.
There used to be these two guys that did a public access channel show on Kiss, the broadband
right.
Kiss.
do you not
Right.
remember that?
Well, I guarantee you, there's got to be at least 24 podcasts on the band Kiss.
Yeah,
So,
no, I just wondered.
So maybe those local access shows were the precursor to podcasts.
Sorry, that's a weird thought. Sorry, move back on.
But I mean, I think some people do podcasts because they just love to talk about the topic, like sports, for instance. A lot of people have sports podcasts, and they're not really maybe going into it to make money or advertise a business. They might make money in the long run, like Barstool or something like that. And then there's businesses that can have a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe you own
Right.
like a law firm, or you're a photographer like Bill, and you want to start a podcast. So you can have that hobby side of podcasting, you can have that business side of podcasting, but going back to the being unique, if you own a business, don't just say this is my law firm podcast. Maybe you talk about, maybe you're a divorce attorney and the podcast is dealing with divorce after the papers are filed or something like that. Like you
have to offer value. Something of value.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. I agree.
So, and differentiating yourself.
Yep.
Again, all about being unique.
So moving on to some tips for your podcast.
Tip number one.
Tip number one is talk about what you know.
Yeah.
It would be a pretty boring podcast if you talked about something you didn't know.
Well, like many of us, we have different interests and things that we know about.
Yes.
But there's always that one or two things that we're particular experts in, and we can talk about it all day long. We're passionate about it. We spend our time learning about it and developing our own skills in that area.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, and
because
I
if
think
you're not passionate about it, nobody else is going to care.
Exactly.
Correct.
You took the words that I was just going to say. If you're not passionate, forget it.
And so
You're going to bore people.
if you're not an expert in it, you can have a guest on.
Yep.
So in our situation, we like to talk about marketing. We may not necessarily know everything there is about event marketing or email marketing or outdoor advertising, but we bring on a guest and it kind of resonates with our marketing fundamentals and background,
Right.
and we end up getting to learn and bring that guest's
Exactly.
expertise in. So
Yeah, no, I've learned a tremendous amount just having the guests on the show and listening to their take on marketing.
Now, you already mentioned this other tip, this next tip. Oh, no, sorry. I'm skipping tips again here. But look at this. Be persistent and consistent.
Yep, persistent and consistent. So we were talking before about when you start doing this, there's going to be a learning curve. You're going to make mistakes.
It's going to take time.
Right, it's going to take time. But don't give up. Be persistent. And the consistency part is if you think you're going to put out a podcast, whenever, that you're not going to go anywhere. So you need to have a schedule. You need to be frequent.
Well, another thing is now, when we first started our podcast early on, two of the big things that they were saying about podcasts at the time was exactly that. Do it on a consistent basis.
Right.
At least once a week is the suggestion. I would go no less than twice a month if you absolutely have to do that. And then the second part of that is it takes time. They say the average podcast doesn't start to gain traction until about 50 to 80 episodes.
Right.
So think about that for a minute. If you're doing once a week, 52 episodes is a
It's
year.
almost a whole year. Yeah.
So it takes time.
And if it's a shorter format podcast, like say you're doing 15 minutes,
Yeah.
you might be able to do a couple a week.
Sure.
Now, the way we do it is we carve out a day once a month where we sit down and record 5 or 6 episodes at a time.
Yes.
Because all of us have busy schedules.
And we have
this
our own
is the-
businesses, yeah.
Right, and this is the way we can do it. Now, we release them once a week, but we record them in a chunk. So you may want to do that. You may want to say one day a month, I'm going to record
Yeah.
all these podcasts. Or you may have, 20 or 30 minutes each day where you sit down and do your podcast.
Yes.
Now, how you do it is up to you. But having those come out on a consistent and regular basis, I think, is important.
Exactly.
Correct.
Agreed. So the next one is realize that your first attempt will suck.
yeah, we
Get
kind
better over
of
time.
alluded to our first attempts, and I think either earlier in this podcast or last time.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, we've all shared that, we kind of look back at our previous podcasts, the early ones, like the first 3 or 4 of them, and went, ooh,
Right.
that was rough.
Yeah, it was. But there's a lot of things we didn't know.
Sure, sure.
Like we talked about this in part 1 with the equipment. We didn't know that you should buy good quality
And
equipment.
we tried incorporating video. We went way above our heads as far as what we were doing, too.
Yeah.
So that didn't help the matter.
So in your own experience, it's probably going to be similar. You're going to start off in the first however many, half a dozen or so. They're not going to be that great,
Yeah.
but that's okay. Keep moving forward. Keep learning
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. What's Dory say? Just keep swimming?
Just keep swimming, yeah.
we can-
So the next start simple. Build up a cache of episodes. We just talked about that.
I am so glad we did that early on because
Yeah. And that's going to help you with the consistency, because when life gets busy or you have a week where you just cannot record a podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. If you are only podcasting once a week and you're recording once a week, what happens when you go on vacation? What happens if you need to get time? Like, we work it into our schedule. We take at least 1 month off every year, sometimes 2. But we can't do that unless we build up a cache ahead of time.
You're getting fancy on
I
this.
am cache. If you don't build up that cache ahead of time, now what do? You don't want to leave your listeners going, "Hey, what happened? Did he go off the? They go off the air and they're not doing podcasts anymore? What's going on? You know?"
Exactly.
So yeah, sorry.
So another tip is don't skimp on the audio. And this goes for whether it's an audio-only podcast or audio and video podcast.
Correct.
I think, Alicia, you mentioned this before. If the audio quality is bad, they will not listen.
Yeah, and if you're doing a video podcast, you can get away a lot with the quality of the video not being top notch.
Right.
But if the audio sucks,
Right. Because people may not watch you every moment, but they'll listen to every moment. And
Exactly.
the audio has to be good quality. So get a good mic.
think about the room you're in, the surroundings you're doing it in.
Right.
Make sure you're really paying attention to that part of it. So I agree.
And the last two really go towards what you're set up to do. So small business owner, entrepreneur, you obviously have a very full schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to consider, do I have the time
Mm-hmm.
and the energy to commit to doing a podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people like to DIY, which is great, but time is money. And if you don't have the time to do all of the things that we've talked about in the last two parts, you need to consider working with someone.
Well, yeah, I mean, we spoke about in the last podcast how we figure out our time for this podcast. It works out to roughly 4 to 5 hours a week
Each.
So that's 15 hours a week if you're trying to do a podcast of the caliber of what we've got right now.
Right, because we divide up the labor. So,
Exactly. So how many business owners have 15 hours a week to put in
Oh
a
my goodness.
podcast?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big time commitment.
Yeah.
And some of them do it. Right?
Sure, agreed.
And some of them do it more efficiently than we do because it's one person, one
Yep.
microphone, and their needs are a little more simple. But it's still a huge time commitment. So consider that ahead of time. And I would say consider putting aside part of your marketing budget for the podcast.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Right?
it's hard to do it on a shoestring budget. It really is. So if you are really looking to use the podcast to grow your business, then look at it as you would approach your website. You would put money and hire someone to help you with that. Your logo, your branding, all that. So think about putting some budget into the podcast.
And on that topic, I think this is a good opportunity for us to mention that we have just recently started offering podcast services for people that want to launch their podcast
Yes.
and learn from our mistakes and also benefit from our expertise. So if you're ready to launch your own podcast, we can help you do that.
Yeah, and I think this is a prime opportunity for us to break it down because we have enough time left in this podcast where we can actually break down each one of the sections of what we're going to be able to offer to people as far as helping them with their podcast.
Right. So first things first, go to our website, which is marketingessentialsteam.com. We have a section called Podcast Services, and it will show you the different packages that we have. So, Bill, why don't you talk a little bit about the Pro Audio package, which is one of the packages we offer for production services.
Okay, so are we going to get into pricing? Do we want to talk about pricing or just have people?
Make them go to the website because I think we were talking about budget, and I feel strongly that this investment is so worth your. I think,
agree.
Yeah, it's like you get a good bang for your buck or whatever.
Okay, so let's start from the very beginning here. We're talking about somebody who's never done a podcast before that is looking to get started. So basically what we decided as a group was that we were going to offer some packages to get somebody started. And then we'll also have some a la carte stuff if they want to go further past the first month or so.
But what's in the basic audio
So,
pro package?
I was getting there. So basically our goal to get you started on each one of these packages is to get you about a month's worth of podcast stuff getting ready to go. So for the pro audio package, what would happen is you would take 4 episodes of your podcast and record them. We'll give you an equipment list, some suggested equipment you can use to record that podcast. And what the Pro Audio package does is you will then send that recording to us. We'll clean it up for you, get it ready for publishing. And
what goes into that? I mean, there's making the audio sound good, but there's the...
Now, you'll find online there are some places that will do this for you already, and their idea of cleaning up your audio is just basically going in and throwing a filter over it to get any background noise to deaden a little bit. But what most people don't realize when they're doing a podcast is there's a lot of, and I'd like to tell you this, and
Or just plain oops.
or oopses.
Gotta start again.
Yes. So basically, with the Pro Audio pack,
Now, when you edit this podcast, Bill, you have to remember to leave these ums in.
yes. Otherwise, I'm going to be all messed up. But no. So what that will do is it'll do the Pro Podcast package will take out those ums and ahs, and it will also allow you one cut mistake per podcast.
Right.
What I
So
mean
if
by that
something
is-
happened during the recording, or you had to stop and start again, that can be edited out.
Yes, typically that there's an extra charge for that, but as part of the package, we're going to do that one time per podcast for the first 4. So with the audio podcast, you're going to get that along with the intro and the outro put together, and then boom,
Right.
that's
so
pretty much it for
all nice and
just that.
clean. You have an audio file that you can upload to whatever platform you're using for your podcast.
Yes. So then the next part of that is the Pro branding package,
Right.
which is Justin's.
So you got to start with Bill, because if you don't have Bill, you really
for-
don't have much to brand.
We're branding a bunch of static.
Right. The audio is the most critical.
Sure.
That has to be in ship shape.
Now, I will say this just before we go onto your part, Justin. Crappy audio can only get helped so much, like we just said a few minutes ago.
Right.
So if you think you're going to use the earbud microphone on your headset, on your earbuds,
Yeah, you can do that,
But it's gonna be crappy.
the quality is only going to be so good.
yeah, no amount of quality
Right.
correction can be done.
So
to
part
fix
of the
that.
audio package, as you said earlier, is a suggested equipment list,
Yes,
which
but-
you can provide.
Exactly. But if you don't use
And-
that equipment,
Right.
you get what you get.
And if you're just one person doing a podcast, you can get by with a fairly simple setup. You know,
Yeah.
one good quality microphone and a laptop to record the audio.
Yep. There's a
And-
couple of different free softwares that you can use,
Right.
depending whether you're Mac or Windows based.
Right. So it's not a huge investment.
No.
But
Under
it does
100
need to
bucks.
be. Yeah, it does need to be quality though.
Correct.
I know for us, we started out with some really crappy
Crappy.
microphones, and we
Yeah,
paid
well,
for
I
it.
think each one of the mics were like $25 a piece. Yeah, it was not.
And then we said, you know what, we need to get quality stuff. So now we have microphones that work really well, and they were like what, $100 a shop.
Roughly $100 a piece. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can, if you're a single podcaster to get the equipment that you need, you can do it between $100 and $150 easily.
Yeah.
Unless you do. Now, I will say the caveat is if it's just a single. If there's, if you're trying to do 3 like us, it's going to cost you considerably more. But anyway. So anyway, Pro branding package.
Yes. So we also offer a branding package. Bill is going to make you sound professional, and this branding package will make you look professional. And you want to look professional. If you go to the iTunes or the Apple Podcast Store and look at all the podcasts that are there, each one has a look and feel to it.
Sure, it's
Each
all
one has a
the
brand.
branding, yeah.
Right. So, you want to engage your audience visually. You want to attract them to your podcast. And this branding package is going to help you do that. So we'll develop a logo and a look and feel for you, as well as create custom images for your social media and for your website, and also the thumbnails for the podcast. So it's a complete package.
Yeah, people don't realize how much goes on in the back end.
Right.
You got to have the thumbnail for the podcast.
Podcast,
You need to
yep.
have, if you're doing like we do, where we have it also hosted on YouTube, you need to have visuals
Thumbnails
for that.
for that.
Thumbnails for that.
Thumbnails for your emails that you're going to send out to let people know that you've published your
Exactly.
podcast when you publish it.
And as typical, none of them are all the same size. So it's
Oh,
always,
no, they're never all the same size. But you want to have that consistent look and feel and brand to your podcast, because that is just as much making you look professional as the professional audio.
Sure.
So once you have your audio together and you have your brand together, then it's time to market your podcast. And Alicia's going to tell you about our pro marketing package.
Right, yeah. So now you have the files and you have your brand and your consistent look, your visuals. You need to get these in front of people. So with the pro marketing package, the add-on here is where we come in and help you with your social media strategy, email marketing, posting, maybe some Facebook Lives to support the podcasting. Basically, how are you going to let people know that you have a new episode? So that's where we come in with that and the details. Did you have any questions on the social media side, or do you think we should just lead them right through?
Ooh, sounds like to me you want to tease that part, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, well, posting, email strategy, can you tag your guests? Can you collaborate with people? Should there be Facebook Live challenges supporting it? What is the short snippet that you need to put out there in order to gain attention?
Yeah.
Right.
How should you position these visuals and lead people through to the audio?
Yeah.
Is really what we aim to do with the marketing side of it. So I think we should lead them through to the website now to
Right.
get more information.
So if you go to our website, which is
Marketing
marketingessentialsteam.com, we have a section called Podcast Services, and the page itself will outline some of the things that we talked about today. But you can also download a PDF. Will give you all the details, all the very particulars about what
Because we didn't touch on every single thing today.
Right. But it gives you all the particulars about what each package contains, and it'll also give you the pricing. So
Now, we will also say that we are giving a discounted price if you do decide to go with all three of the packages in one.
right, so you can purchase the packages individually if you just want to do the audio only and just have a nice, clean sound file that you can upload to your podcasting platform.
Great.
You can do that. But if you take all three together, the audio, the marketing, and the branding, we'll give you a discount on that bundle.
Yeah, correct
Right.
me if I'm wrong. It's a pretty hefty discount.
It's a $600
Plus, you
discount.
get to
yeah.
work with all three of us at once. That's a deal you can't pass up on. Come on, no price tag on that.
Right,
And
right.
I will add to that here's the other good part about this. What people don't think. If you're planning on trying to farm out all this different stuff and say, oh yeah, I'll go and get a guy to do my brand for me for my podcast, and then I'm going to have somebody else do the social media marketing. Now you got to do all the legwork to try to get a group of people that work together well. We already work together well,
That's true.
so you're
So
actually
it's a
getting
one-stop shop.
it's a one-stop shop. It makes it a little bit easier. Like Alicia said, you get us all at once.
So
With that being said,
This can be a little bit on the short side for a podcast, but
but still super valuable.
still super
absolutely,
valuable.
don't sell us short.
I'm just looking at the time. We got a lot of information in it in a short period of time today, which is odd for us.
All right. So
Head on over.
That's
too.
right. So take the 5 minutes that we saved you and go make yourself a cup of coffee. And we're going to wrap this podcast episode up. And until next time, we'll see you later.
next time. Bye. Thank you for joining us today. And as always, you can find the back episodes of our podcast on Apple Podcasts, and you can also find us on our YouTube channel. Both of them are the Marketing Essentials team.
You can find us on the web at marketingessentialsteam.com. And if you subscribe through our website, you'll receive a weekly email and letting you know when each episode has been published. Also, you'll receive a link to subscriber-only content.
You can also find us on Facebook in our private Facebook group. Just search Little Rhody Marketing Support Group. It's a great place for other marketing professionals and business owners where we can share marketing advice, challenges, and general trends. Hope to see you there.